the Texas Storytelling Festival was, it's in big tents, it's outside, and sometimes some of the nicest things that would happen would be outside the tents in the moonlight after an event was over, or when someone went out to have a smoke in some far-off place away from the tents that were there. And there was one storyteller, a Cajun storyteller. Her name was J.J. Reneau. And I remember after she had finished one of her concerts and another concert had started, she and I went out to share a cigarette out in the moonlight, far away from where the tent was. And she told me that her father had passed the year before, that it had been a difficult year for her. But the thing that was most bizarre for her was her mother's reaction to it all. Well, I was very sympathetic. I wanted to hear her story. I wanted to hear what had happened to her with her father's death. And she told me that at the funeral, her mother was very quiet, and all the people were gathered at the graveside. And after everyone left, and they all drove back into town, her mother said, "Will you drive me one more time to the gravesite? There's some things I didn't get to do." So she thought her mother didn't get a chance to say a proper goodbye to her husband, to JJ's father. And so she drove her back up there to the gravesite. And when they got there to where the mound of earth was and he was buried and everything, she turned her back so that her mother could have a quiet moment alone with her thoughts and her husband in the ground there. And that was when she heard this rustling and crinkling and rustling. And she turned around to see what her mother was doing. And her mother was a great aficionado of arts and crafts, macrame, and making small wall hangings out of interesting pieces of ribbon and cloth and things like that. And as she turned back, she saw that her mother was stripping every wreath and every graveside memorial of all of its ribbons, wires, and various little accessories. And she looked up at her daughter, JJ, and she said, "This stuff costs a fortune in the shop." And she said after that that her mother had made all of that stuff into little pieces of wall art, and that she couldn't bear anymore to go home and look around the living room and see what her mother had done with the memorial ribbons and pieces that had been at her father's gravesite. And that's one of my memories of the Texas Storytelling Festival.